I know you've talked about it in the past being a concern that, we're adding jobs in locations that aren't necessarily aligned with where we're adding housing.
Yeah.
I guess that's a way to state it.
To me, that's the number one issue in San Diego. It is housing affordability. But it's not just affordability. It's not just that our median income relative to the median cost of a house has a huge gap, larger than most anywhere in the country. And that's a big issue. It's also that we're not building housing near enough to jobs, which creates transportation and commutation issues and stress and all that. And we're not building the right kind of housing. Most of our housing inventory that we've built in the post-recession years from 2008 to the present has been apartments. Most has been in downtown San Diego or in UTC and to some extent a few other places. But it's been focused on millennials, people who are fairly young still, or alternatively on empty nesters, people like me who are fairly old, but not families. And so most of the job creation is for younger people forming families, and we're not providing housing for them. And we're not providing housing in the right places, which creates all kinds of land use and political tension in this community. So it's a huge issue. In fact, we did a study that was sponsored and paid for by the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce about a year and a half ago, and to try to sort of address the linkage between the strength of our economy and the circumstances of our housing market or housing affordability. And as part of that study, we took a survey. And we asked sort of the survey research question to CEOs and owners of companies, what keeps you up at night? And their answer, universally, 100%, was our inability to retain our workforce or to add to them. And that goes directly to the housing issue. And you can see that, sort of play out in a lot of different manifestations in San Diego County. One of the ones that I have the most concern about is that there's 14,000 cars that commute daily from Temecula and Murrieta in Riverside County, or thereabouts, southwest Riverside County, into San Diego by persons who have purchased housing there because it's cheaper, but they have their jobs here in San Diego because this is where the jobs are, and they stuff up the I-15 corridor every day. And so that's just an obvious example of our inability to add housing where it's needed, and people sort of fleeing our jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, and all the negative externalities of that get played out: congestion, longer commutes, carbon going into the air because of cars. It's anti-environmental.
That's what I think is the irony, right? Because a big part of why we're not expanding into certain rural areas of the county is to protect the environment and natural resources. At least that's the line, right?
Yes, it's the ultimate hypocrisy.
But we're throwing cars on the freeway to throw carbon into the air that all is going to drift, whether you're in California or Texas or
the carbon doesn't care whether there's a line that says this is San Diego or that's Riverside.
Right.
It's the ultimate hypocrisy of the environmentalists or the anti-growth people or the NIMBYs, whatever you want to call them, who have persuaded a large portion of the electorate and the representatives that we need to limit housing, or they put obstacles in the way, like they file lawsuits or just make it complicated and directly more expensive. And that, all right, people sort of vote with their feet, or they just move out of the county. And so, the purpose of that study was basically to draw that linkage between economic prosperity and housing. You really can't have economic prosperity without providing for the people that work in the job centers. And that's ultimately a huge problem in this region, because what we've also discovered is that this is really for the unprecedented in our region. We have more people moving out of the region than moving in. We have a lot of growth still in this region, but it's mostly from natural increase, more people being born than dying.
A lot of millennials having babies now, right?
Yeah, and they're leaving. And that's the problem that employers are most concerned about. And if you see that problem now, you're certainly going to see it play out over the coming years. And that ultimately will have an economic consequence.